everyone. Welcome back to Staff Picks, a WPL program where library staff from across the system get together to share their love of reading with you, the community. We want to start today by acknowledging that Winnipeg is located on Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Innu, and the Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our drinking water comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation in Treaty 3 territory. Thank you for coming to be with us. Each episode of Staff Picks has a theme. We're very excited about today's theme. So the selection of books that we've picked are all around our theme, and we picked them to share them with you because we like them. Today's theme is Read with Pride, which means we're focusing on 2SLGBTQQIA plus authors. So if you're unfamiliar with that term, that means two-spirited, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, questioning, intersex, asexual, plus community, which we're excited to focus on these works. Every book featured today is available in the library collection, sometimes in multiple formats and languages, which is great. And every book in the episode is going to be listed in an info guide, which will be listed in the description below. So how does this work, you may ask? In a round robin style, each staff member is going to take their turn telling you about a book. And at the end, there's a lightning round in which we have to present our books very quickly. We'll start with a round of introductions, and then we're just gonna get going talking about books because that's what we really like to do. My name is Courtney, and I use she, her pronouns.
My name is Meg. My pronouns are she, her.
And my name's Kim, and I also use she, her pronouns.
And with that, we're gonna start. Oh, and I get to start, so you get to hear me more, you lucky, lucky people. I'll try not to make any mistakes. Today, we're starting with one of my new favorite authors. We're going to start with The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. I know. Meg's like, yeah, it's good stuff. So this is a YA fiction. It's the first book in the Sunbearer duology, which means two books. Celestial Monsters is the second book, and it came out last year and is also in the collection. We have this book in print and ebook. We also have it in French print as well. It's about 322 pages, so it's not bad. That's a pretty good length. And the first thing I would say about it, like the tag to get you in, is like, welcome to the Sunbearer Trials, where teen demigods compete in a series of challenges with the highest of stakes. Right? Like, not bad. So as each new decade begins, the sun's power must be replenished in order to keep the evil gods at bay. It's like pretty serious stuff. So 10 teenage demigods are selected to compete in the Sunbearer Trials. The winner will rise to fame and glory, and the loser gets to be sacrificed to the god in order to keep the sun going. So that's a little intense, but they've made it as a great honor. So people are okay with it, I guess. I don't know. Our hero in this book is Teo, and he's a Jade, which is the lower class of demigods. And he is the 17-year-old trans son of Quetzal, which is the goddess of the birds. So he has wings. They're fabulously described. He must compete against more powerful, better trained opponents in order to survive the trials and protect all of the people. This book is fun. It's really well written. It's Aiden Thomas is the writer. Aiden is a trans Latinx writer who uses he, him, or they, them pronouns. And this is just a really good escape into a Mexican-inspired mythology. It's kind of like Mexican mythology with Hunger Games twist, if you were going to like stick it in something. Like a genre, sorry. It's a good read for those who kind of have moved out of like a Percy Jackson or a Rick Riordan Presents series and was looking for something else. I chose it because I really enjoyed reading it and the sequel. Aiden's other work, like Cemetery Boys, is very popular, also very good. None of the books have disappointed me when I've read them so far. They're really quality YA material. It's a well-written, vibrant world with really realistic, authentic, and lovable characters. You feel like you know Teo, and that then you get really invested and care about him and his journey. So that's pretty great. Honorable mention would be the other book. Also, Cemetery Boys has a sequel coming out this year, which is exciting for people who are in the know about Aiden Thomas. So that's The Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas.
So now it's my turn. My first book is Our Wives Under the Sea by Julia Armfield. My hairdresser recommended I read this book, and now I will read anything she recommends. It was wonderful. It is a work of adult fiction. It's about 200 pages long, so not like too much, but a good read. We have it as physical book, ebook, and a wonderful e-audiobook that is about 6 hours long, read by Annabelle Baldwin and Robin Holdaway. So, Our Wives Under the Sea, my tagline for this one. I would say it is a wonderfully quiet horror that blends slice of life, showing the day-to-day life of the characters, and the paranormal as strange and inexplicable things happen. It's a great work of speculative fiction that dives into the nature of humanity, love, and grief against the backdrop of this mysterious majesty of the deep ocean. So, everything I love? Maybe. The audiobook is available on Libby online, and there's a different reader for each of our main characters. They do a great job reading, and it brings quite a bit to the story. So, the novel tells the story from two perspectives. Leah, a scientist on a submarine expedition that goes horribly wrong, and Miri, Leah's wife, who's struggling to support Leah after the submarine surfaces. So, Leah's perspective is kind of in the past, but like told in the present kind of thing, and tells us about the submarine expedition. So it's supposed to be a 3-week research mission, goes horribly wrong, and they end up plunging into the deep sea for 6 months. So the trip starts, everything's going well, and then very quickly, just like no power to control the submarine whatsoever. It just starts sinking, sinking, sinking. And this group of scientists is trying to use their combined knowledge to figure out what happened and can't. So theoretically, everything is working fine. Life support is working fine. And there are a lot of oddities, like the emergency food and supplies are enough to last months, which is a lot longer than they were expecting. So as time stretches on, they continue to plummet. We are getting the scientist's perspective through Leah as they struggle to maintain mental clarity. The crew starts hearing strange sounds outside. Leah starts to question the organization that funded the exhibit, only known as the Center. And we have the added aspect of, all these oddities are happening, and we're getting it through Leah's perspective, who herself is starting to lose the sense of time and place and herself. The other half of the story is told from Miri's perspective, Leah's wife, after the submarine has surfaced. So the center provided no information during the 6 months that the submarine was missing. Of course, a very difficult time for Miri and the other families. And then the crew surfaces. And then it's just weird. So Miri's at this place where she's having to come to terms with the fact that the woman who's returned is not her wife. So this active, social, curious scientist is now like having trouble keeping food down. She never leaves her room, and she has no desire to engage with really anybody. And then weird things start happening. And it's really all I can tell you without spoiling what makes this so great. So it is a really great, surreal, strange, intimate story with this beautiful backdrop of the ocean that is both like comforting and foreboding. Some of the themes and sections are kind of a nod to classic sci-fi, like the Twilight Zone. And Julia Armfield writes the ocean like space. It's this great unknown, and we're seeing this like small bit of humanity in there. And just the lovely intimacy of, this really loving, beautiful relationship when Miri's having to face the fact that this just isn't her wife anymore. And what do you do with that? So I have been referring to this as horror. It does have horror elements, but there's very little violence or gore. I'm not really a fan of those, not a lot. There are moments of body horror, though, and they do stick with you. So it's not bad. You have been warned, but, it really, really brings you to the moment, we will say. So I would recommend to people who like that kind of quiet, surreal, psychological horror without a lot of violence. So recommend Our Wives Under the Sea, Julia Armfield.
Thank you for that one. So my first pick is a collection of poems, actually. It's called Alive at the End of the World by Save Jones. And This book is really heavy, actually, and it carries a lot of raw grief, which is kind of a theme in all my selections. But there's also some comfort in it and levity. I would say this is a very queer book, and it really touches on Jones's own life, brings in the experience of losing so many in the community to AIDS, also his own experiences of racism and homophobia, and also, big love for community as well. I actually wanted to read one poem, if that's okay. It's called That's Not Snow, It's Ash. You are no singer, but one night a song is stolen from you, never to be returned. The loss is like a dream about your lover, burned alive. In the morning, he mumbles, making breakfast, favorite mug in hand, fine. But you saw what you saw. You drink your coffee, pat his thigh, and watch the snow fall outside, pretending you don't smell smoke. He's fine, you think. We are fine. And at the end, what Said says about this particular poem is that it's kind of the heart of the book, and it really, that he didn't really think about that the end of the world might feel like a quiet morning with your partner. And it actually made me think a bit about the recent wildfires in Los Angeles. And so Sade Jones actually is on a podcast, and that podcast is called Vibe Check, which he co-hosts, and it's really, talking about pop culture, but something that they were confronting were the LA wildfires, and that's kind of how I came to find out about his poetry collections. He's a really, well-known and celebrated poet, author. So this is something that I recommend, especially if you enjoy poetry and you're looking for something to read that brings that comfort, but it's also quite raw as well.
That sounds good. I'm going to have to pick that one up. Okay, I'm doing something questionable that we're going to see how it goes. I'm recommending the second book in this series. Why? Why wouldn't I pick the first one? Because this book is so good. Yes, I told Meg to read this. Meg loves it now. So I'm talking about Somewhere Beyond the Sea, which is by TJ Klune, this is the second book in the Cerulean Chronicles. The first book is The House on the Cerulean Sea. It's also in the collection. This one just came out last year. It's adult fantasy. We have it in print, ebook, audiobook, CD, and large print because it's that good. I'm not going to stop saying that, by the way. It's about 416 pages. It'll feel like it went by in 5 seconds because it is such a good book. I may be overselling this. No, I'm not. So the tagline would be, it's a magical house, a secret past, a summons that could change everything. So I'm going to be careful because this is the second book. I'm not going to ruin it, but everyone needs to read these books, and anything else by TJ Klune. I guess I'm just like fangirling over here pretty hard. So yes, I'm recommending both or all of his books. Shocking, I know, since I break the rules all the time. In essence, this is a series about a man named Linus Barker, who's a government employee in the department in charge of magical youth. So he travels to Marseille's island to visit an orphanage that houses 6 extraordinary youths and their caregivers. But it's like so much more magical and wonderful than that. So I'm not going to say anything else. But what I'm going to share is 2 excerpts of TJ's work, of what he said about this book. He based this book around the 60s scoop, actually, because he felt that he needed to write a story that was celebrating children's differences and to show the positive effects of giving children a safe and supportive place to be themselves. This book is really mirroring some of the othering that's going on in today's society. And that's all I'm going to say about that. But it is a beacon of light in a dark world. TJ Klune is an asexual queer author that uses he, him pronouns. And in this book, he wrote the following to his community. I write these books for anyone who wants to read them, but in my head and my heart, I'm always thinking of you first and foremost. In case no one has told you this today, I'm proud of you. I know it's hard being human. I know that it seems like things are getting, I'm going to cry a little bit because this makes me upset because it's just so beautiful. I know that it seems like things are getting more difficult, but please don't forget that while hate might be loud, we are louder, and no one can take that away from us. Isn't that beautiful? Oh, and I didn't even make that the last thing I'm going to say, because then he says to the next part, to his trans readers, without you, there is no us. You are vital, beautiful, and you deserve everything in this world. Oh, see why I love him? Oh, anyway, sappy moment from Courtney. It's worth it. I chose this book because of everything I just said, so I don't have to say anything more. Just read it, please. It'll make you a better human. Okay, Meg, your turn. I'll stop crying now.
It's okay. I'm not crying. You're crying. I actually don't think you oversold those books. They actually are that amazing. And everyone I've recommended them to has said the same thing. So, yeah. My next books, taking a page out of Courtney's book, are two books. Oh, wrong side. So these are my next reads: The Darkness Outside Us and The Brightness Between Us by Elliot Schrafer. So these admittedly are outside of my usual genre. They were recommended to me as, quote, gays in space, which is, I guess, true, but they are a lot more than that. So I would say we are a gripping, far future space thriller featuring enemies to lovers as they grapple with what it means to be human in the expanse of space. Both books, about 400 pages. They are YA fiction. We have them as physical books and ebooks. Both so good. They have themes of hope, love, determination, and, just a dash of existential crisis. We're in space. We're figuring out what humanity means. It's a thing. They are also gay men written by a gay man, which is just wonderful and unfortunately not common enough, in my opinion. So the setup, where in the future, space travel is now relatively common and Earth is divided into two nations on the brink of war, the Federation and the Democratia. After a mission to Titan goes wrong, the two nations agree to a joint rescue mission for, frankly, good PR, but it is not an easy collaboration. The ship, the Coordinated Endeavor, is strictly divided into two halves. One astronaut from each nation will operate their own half. They only interact when they have to. Our main character is Ambrose Cusk, and he's from the Federation. He is our Captain Kirk space traveler. Beautiful, devil-may-care golden boy, also very intelligent, capable, and honorable. And yes, I know that's a very abridged description of Kirk. Please forgive me. I could go on about him, but I will not. The book opens when Ambrose wakes up on the Coordinated Endeavor with no memory of the launch. The operating system, the OS, tells him he hit his head during the launch, but everything is fine. Except it's clearly not. First of all, how did he hit his head during the launch? The OS is speaking with his mother's voice, which was not planned. And the ship needs many, many repairs, like hundreds of repairs it's requesting. And it's only supposed to have been in space for a short period. So strange, but not impossible. He gets to work fixing the ship and soon sees signs of other people and previous work. So he figures his crewmate from Democratia must have done it, Kodiak, but Kodiak is locked in his half of the spaceship, no desire to interact. So the book follows Ambrose and soon Kodiak as they work to repair the ship and prepare for the rescue to Titan. Ambrose is increasingly convinced that something is strange, and Kodiak eventually is forced to agree. And then something happens that literally had me shoot out of my chair and yell, "What?" So that's all I can tell you. This is probably the biggest plot twist I've ever encountered. And then after that, there's just like more and more and more. And you're just like, where is this going? What book am I reading? It's really fascinating. Kind of not at all what you sign up for, but so much better. The sequel, Brightness Between Us, has its own plot, characters, of course, but there is a lot of info in here that really enriches the first book. Also features Owl, one of our main narrators, who is a character that others call daughter and sister. but Owl refers to themselves as, quote, someone with a uterus. So Owl doesn't use any feminizing language to refer to themselves in their internal monologue that we get as narration, and often strongly resents that they're treated differently because they are someone with a uterus. So I really appreciated this view into the inner thoughts of a gender diverse individual, and I think it's well considered. Overall, definitely recommend if you've read book one. If you're going to read this series, I would say read them in order. If you jump into book 2, you're going to lose a lot of context. I recommend for sci-fi readers who enjoy the human experience against the backdrop of space. Both books start a bit slow for me because there's a lot of world building, a lot of character development, and then they just boom, go. They become the kind of thriller you truly can't put down.
Thanks for that. And I also have 2 for my next recommendation. So this is the Grievers. It's actually going to be a trilogy by Adrienne Marie Brown, one of my, favorite authors and podcasters as well. So the 3rd book is coming out, I think this spring, so we can look forward to that. But I'm going to focus more on Grievers, the first book. So this is a trilogy of speculative fiction, and it really is coming back to that theme of grief, which is a theme for, I think, a lot of queer novels. So this is a tale of what happens when we can no longer ignore what has been lost in this world. It's the story of a city so plagued by grief that it can no longer function. It's set in Detroit, and we meet Dune, who's the daughter of patient 0 of a mysterious illness that throws people into a non-responsive state from which nobody recovers. So doctors in the book describe the state as being something like severe depression or PTSD, and name the illness, which spreads throughout the city and only strikes Black people, as syndrome H8. So the series brings in some magical elements. Dune is the main character, and she finds a physical model of Detroit's history in her basement that her father had been working on, and it's mysteriously growing. Both of her parents were activists in Detroit, and when we meet Dune, they've both passed, and her mother, Jess, as being patient 0. She's also caring for her grandmother, who's gone mute and refuses to speak. And, this book explores a different reality, but there's a lot of parallels to the current context as well. I think the most interesting parts of the book was learning more about Dune and her past relationships with her mother and dealing with the grief of losing her. Dune also has this deep love for Detroit, which I found really inspiring. She bikes around the city and helps everybody that she can. It really, it's a crisis situation. I think it's really reflecting kind of the author Adrienne Marie Brown's life and experience. She lives in Detroit and she's an activist as well. Um, so Brown has done a lot of work bringing forward the life's work of Octavia Butler, who wrote Kindred and Parable of the Sower, among others. She's a queer author. She's also written some nonfiction about relationships. So, and one thing too that I was intrigued by was the relationship, Dune's past relationship with a woman named Marta. Their relationship was a bit tumultuous, and they end up being separated, but we get a glimpse into it when Marta comes by before she leaves Detroit, as everybody's leaving and it's being locked down. So then once we get to the second installment, it's called Maroons. We get a bit more of, some different kind of romantic aspects, which I enjoyed, but also community building and when Dune meets other characters who are, dealing with the basically the apocalyptic Detroit. And Dune Falls for a particularly intriguing character that I'm interested in is someone who Dune falls for, who is full of contradictions. He really lived as a gay man. He was a member of the National Guard, and they fall in love, and it's a pretty interesting part of the story. Um, so the next book that's coming out, I believe this spring, is called Ancestors. So yeah, it's available through AK Press, and we'll have it at the library as well. They are available as paperback at this time, so we have a few copies in the system. And I guess, the reason why I chose it was because I actually enjoy the author's podcast as well. She has a podcast called How to Survive the End of the World. And I thought it was really fitting for this list because she's a Black queer visionary writer, and her aim is to really decenter traditional power dynamics in writing, and through organizing as well. So yeah, that's my second recommend.
Ooh, those sound interesting. I like it. All right, it's my turn again. I'm going rogue and going nonfiction. But I'm not going rogue in that it's super feminist. Shocking, I know. Have you heard of Women Living Deliciously? Do you know Florence Given? You need to. So another thing I'm going to come clean with, you see where that is? I haven't fully read this book because I feel that you need to read this book like chapter by chapter. But I'll get to that in a minute. So this is a nonfiction book. We have it as a print and an ebook, both of which you can digest in chunks. It's about 304 pages. And the tagline is that Women Living Deliciously wants us to fall in love with our lives. Isn't that a lovely concept? I think so. Like, who doesn't want that? So the blurb says it will help women uncover the sense of awe and wonder that has been buried by the layers of shame, perfectionism, and self-objectification that get piled on us by the patriarchy. For too long, we have internalized the belief that our bodies are things to be looked at instead of lived in. It's embarrassing to fully express ourselves, that we cannot trust parts of ourselves that are so full of desire. This book will unpack the many barriers that women face when trying to access joy so that they can discover the delicious life that is theirs for the taking. Every human should read this book too. So Florence Given is a bisexual British writer, illustrator, podcast influencer. She draws the cover and also everything inside of the book. And she uses she, her pronouns. I found it best, like I said, to do small bursts because you're challenging ideas that have been stuck in your brain for your whole life in imaging, television, books, whatever. So you're going to, you may agree with them, you may disagree with them, you may have some growing that you do with this book, which is great. That's kind of what it's doing. But I do it in chunks. So I'll read a chapter of one of my fiction books, and then I'll read this, and then I'll think. And I find for me that works really well. So I had to go buy it because I have to return this because a lot of people want it. Yeah, it's just you're shaking up those gender roles and the patriarchal expectations. So it takes some time. It's if your jam is feminist tomes, this is for you. I'm going to warn you, this is an adult book with adult themes and language, and you need to govern yourself accordingly. Honorable mentions, if you want more books like this, she has another book called, her first book of nonfiction called Women Don't Owe You Pretty. Love that title. And it's also similar to another book I recommended in the past called On Our Best Behavior by Elise Lonan. So, women living deliciously. Find your joy. That's all I'll say about that.
Excellent choice, Courtney. Very good. My next book is also nonfiction. Look at us. It is I'm Afraid of Men by Vivek Shreya. Nonfiction, a short read, 85 pages. We have it as a physical book, an ebook, and an e-audiobook read by the author that I truly cannot recommend enough. If you don't know Vivek Shreya, She's a wonderviful Canadian artist who is singer, actor, performer, visual artist, writer, poet. As she describes it, she uses various methods to express her message so one of them can speak to you, which is a wonderful idea. Her works often come to themes of identity, speaking to her experience as a spiritual person, a trans individual, a person of color, and a person whose work puts her in the public eye. I've read many of her books, which you can see here. And it was frankly antagonizing for me to pick one, but I did go with this one. It's I'm Afraid of Men, one of her more recent books. Gives us a Canadian perspective into a trans person of color. Again, really recommend the audiobook. Her narration is just so amazing. In I'm Afraid of Men, Vivek reflects on how often aware and afraid she is in public and how that impacts all aspects of her life, her work, her spirituality, her relationships, romantic and otherwise. It offers perspective into her life and what it means to live openly and publicly as a complex, multifaceted person and how others perceive that complex, multifaceted person. So there is difficult content, but I found this book so accessible. There's no blame or shame here. She is just telling her story. Like, it feels like you're sitting down for coffee and she's just telling you why men, and later in the book, women, are a source of fear. She talks about the exhaustion of needing to be hyper aware in public and in public forums like social media, and speaks to her experience as a trans person, person of color. And of course, it's all in there. One of my favorite quotes from Vivek Shreya is that one of the reasons the popular advice to be yourself can be confounding or intimidating is that we are vast and immeasurable. This book covers it. So, speaking to her trans experience, Vivek talks about the constant stares that make her feel alien and the various ways people react, as in her words, she is deemed somehow both too masculine and too feminine. She often gets blatantly sexual comments, like car service drivers who start talking about their sexual experiences, which is just wildly inappropriate. On another occasion, a driver handed her a bag of garbage and asked her to throw it out, implying that that's a woman's job. Just horrible experiences that show how deeply ingrained both sex and gender are in our culture, and for some reason, the need many people feel to assert these standards over her. Vivek explains how, since coming out, she feels the need to take time to soften communications to avoid the recipient getting angry or upset, which leads to a discussion on the freedoms afforded in her life before transition and the loss of male privilege, even as a person of color. Which brings us to another facet of her identity, as expressed in the book, her experience as a person of color in a predominantly white environment. So not only is Vivek Shreya a trans individual waiting for an Uber in a gold dress, she's a brown woman with a bindi on her brow, which is so personal and so important to her, but also signals to strangers that there's another target on her, as she puts it. From her experience, she knows it's safer to remove the bindi when she leaves a venue, but that act weighs on her. That's such a horrible thing to have to do. So, as I said, with all that heavy content, this is truly an enjoyable read. Her writing is conversational, almost matter of fact. Unlike chapter to chapter, I just gobbled this book up and then thought about it for a long time and then read it again and thought about it for a long time. There is really no shame or blame placing. She's telling us her experiences that speak to why she's afraid of men, why men are afraid of her, and why she's afraid of women. She is telling us about how difficult it is, but where she finds joy in being herself. So I'd recommend to anyone who seeks to be an ally to the BIPOC or 2SLGBTQIA plus community, particularly the trans community. It's a fantastic book to gain insight into someone else's experience, to learn what help and support they wish to be offered rather than what we might think they need, so to speak. Highly recommend. Also, honorable mention to How to Fail as a Pop Star, now a CBC show, and People Change, her most recent book. So overall, look up Vivek Shreya, find a book, a poem, a song that speaks to you to hear her message.
Thanks for those recommendations, Meg. So my next pick is Bad Cree by Jessica Johns. So this book is available in print, ebook, and as well, we actually have it as a book club kit for anyone to borrow. And that's how I really came into across this book. Was a book club that I'm work with here. We read this book. I actually debated a little bit adding it to the list, and I think that maybe sometimes it would get left off of queer lit lists. But it is really a truly outstanding book. The author, Jessica Johns, is a queer Cree auntie from Sucker Creek First Nation in Treaty 8. And I really wanted to highlight her work. And I'm also looking forward to seeing what, this was her first book, so I'm looking forward to seeing what she comes up with next. The book is about a millennial Cree woman named Mackenzie living in Vancouver, far from her community. She discovers she has the ability to bring things back from her dreams, and it sort of turns into a nightmares. It becomes so difficult that she travels back to her home territory to be with her family. And, the story is, it's a story of a complex Indigenous family, and they're navigating a lot of loss. As well, it's important to note that dreams are a really important part of Cree culture, and it's really amazing how this book actually centers dreams and how Mackenzie's dreams are woven through the book. I was reading some reviews, and someone called it a casually queer book. So the author has filled the book with queer characters. Mackenzie's best friend is a two-spirit, non-binary Indigenous femme, and you kind of also, it's just not really, it's just kind of in there, and it's just a fact. Like, I really love that. And, there's also a character who's bisexual, who wants to date and a brother and a sister at the same time, and it's a very funny moment and kind of a scary scary scene. So, as well, there's another sister there who, reads as potentially lesbian, but it's just kind of there. The focus of the book is really on family love, and kin. And um, there's an element that I think is also really central to the novel, which is that when Mackenzie starts telling her family about what's happening, they all really believe her. And I think this is kind of would have been a really different book if they hadn't believed her and she was having to convince them. And that would be, I think that's kind of the part of the decolonizing aspect as well. There's also some horror and supernatural elements in the book, and grief is a big thread in the novel. So Jessica Johns has said that the speculative fiction genre are ways of envisioning the future and the future that we want, a more diverse and embracing type of society. And I think that's something that I wanted to bring to all my selections as well, is thinking about how speculative fiction and science fiction kind of do that for um, queer authors and queer community.
Adding to TBR list, must read. It is now lightning time. Fast, quick, hurry. So I'm going back to 2015. Lumberjanes. Yes. Lumberjanes is a YA graphic novel series. There are 20 volumes. Each volume has four comics isn't the right word, but you know what I mean. 4 installments. So there's 20 total with 4 each in them. We have them in print and ebook. And friendship to the max. Because that's the quote that's a quote. You'll get it, just read it. It's fine. So at Miss Quinzilla Thwiskin, I'm going to say this wrong, Piniqual Thistle Crumpets Camp for hardcore lady types. Right? I want to go. Things are not what they seem. 5 rad, butt kicking best pals are determined to have an awesome summer together, and they're not going to let a magical quest or an array of supernatural critters get in their way. The mystery keeps getting bigger and bigger, and it all begins here. I picked this because it's one of the first ones I read in library school that really got me into graphic novels. Yeah. um, it it's classic feel-good graphic novel for a YA audience with female empowerment that anybody can enjoy. And it's pretty. And there's lots of different illustrators that get in on that and illustrate it differently. So it is a good, once you get into this one, you will see different Dark Horse comics and different artists and their work in it. It's a rabbit hole, but it's a good one to fall into. So that's Lumberjanes, Volume 1, Beware the Kitten Holy. It's as fast as I could do that.
I also have a graphic novel. It's like we planned this, but we didn't. My choice is the Tea Dragon trilogy. So here we have the first book, Tea Dragon Society. They are juvenile graphic novels. There are 3 books, about 100 pages each, and we have them as physical and ebooks. These books make you feel like you're just enjoying your favorite cup of tea with an adorable dragon just curled up in your lap, like in a sunny afternoon. They're just so lovely. They're adorable. They have fairly simple plot lines, but they're just so heartfelt. We have an inclusive cast, found family, and these beautiful illustrations. Each book has its own plot and characters revolving around tea dragons. So tea dragons, which, talking about fangirling, I have one of the stuffies of. So this theoretically would be a life-size tea dragon. They are small, delicate dragons that require a great deal of care. They're quite temperamental. You can see this one specifically looks very grumpy. This is Mountain Chamomile, who looks grumpy but is known to specifically just enjoy naps a lot. If you can form a relationship with a tea dragon, you can harvest the little flowers and leaves that grow from them to make exceptional tea. The tea also has magical properties that allow you to share the dragon's memories. So we get like views into the past of some of the characters this way, and it's a lovely method of storytelling. And there's like tea leaves just everywhere. It's so beautiful. You can jump in wherever you want, but book 1 will give you the best introduction to the concept of tea dragons. We have a whole section in the back here that just like walks you through tea dragons. I recommend for readers who enjoy heartwarming stories with an inclusive cast, cozy illustrations, supportive grown-ups, which, we don't always see in these books, and adorable temperamental dragons. So Tea Dragon Society would recommend.
Well, I didn't get the memo about the graphic novel, but my lightning round pick, first one is Maggie Terry by Sarah Schulman. So first I'll just mention the just available in print in our collection. First, I'll mention the author. So iconic writer Sarah Schulman is a longtime AIDS and queer activist. She was co-founder of the Mix Festival and the ACT UP Oral History Project. She's a playwright, author of 17 books, including the life-changing nonfiction book Conflict is Not Abuse and My American History, Lesbian and Gay Life During the Reagan Bush Years. So look into her. This one is written in 2018, was a pulp fiction detective novel published by Feminist Press that has a deep dive portrait of an ex-cop in her first week of a new job after having been hospitalized for substance addiction after the death of her police partner and the breakup of her marriage. So a complex character there. The setting has the backdrop of a madman in the White House, and things that aren't quite working, like subway's really slow, it's not working in New York City, and the heat of the summer is intense. She's hoping to rebuild her life and reunite with her daughter, but on the first day as private investigator lands her in the middle of a sensational case. It's both a character study of a woman with addictions and a political commentary, with a mystery sort of mixed in there.
Sounds good. A new one. This one's new to me. This author is new to me, and I'm so, so glad. Seeing Gender, an illustrated guide to identity and expression by Iris Gottlieb. So this one's from 2019. This is found in our adult nonfiction collection. We have it in print, and we have other books by Iris Gottlieb as well, which are basically their style is to have words and then their illustrations. That's what those are brains, by the way. Like just because that was an odd page to pick. And so they have these moments of like science with their illustration. So it makes it personal, but it's also not a lot of text. So it's nice and bite-sized. So you can get into an array of topics around gender so that if you're not familiar and you're looking to familiarize yourself with verbiage and different things around this, this is a good spot to start. They call it a browsable potpourri of information and musings on gender. Thank you for that one, Kirkitz. That was not a bad little start. So it's meticulously researched and fully illustrated. It's understanding gender and how people travel through that. I'm just going to steal School Library Journal's summary because they did a good job. Gottlieb takes the complexities of gender in the modern world through an easy to digest writing, humor, and powerful illustrations. It's like a series of informative Twitter threads compressed into a book. So you can like read a page, walk away, think about it, ask some questions. Despite the brevity, the terminology and concepts are full. Each bright spread stands alone, and it's a good one to flip through at leisure. So it talks about some heavy material, but overall, it's hopeful and understanding. They said if a book could be friendly, this is your friend here. It's engaging and acknowledges that people are fallible, which is comforting. If you've made a mistake, learn how to fix it and identify people the way they've asked to, because it's important to support our people. And they say here to give this to anyone who exists in a gendered society, which means everyone, right? That's what this book does. This is just a book to help you learn how to be respectful to everyone. And that's all that we're trying to do here as humans. Trigger warning, this is a book for adults with some adult themes and images. They do recommend it for grade 7 and up, but govern yourself accordingly. It is a good read. I would say another one that would help understand concepts of gender would be Gender Outlaws by Kate Bornstein. And that was not lightning at all. But, sometimes we talk long and it's worth it. Your turn, Meg.
That's good. I found this one very hard to narrow down to a minute, so probably going over. We have The Queer Bible, a collection of essays by queer icons talking about their queer icons. Amazing. Editor Jack Guinness started the online Queer Bible project as a platform for queer people to tell their stories. The project became so popular, it resulted in this book. Best way to describe the project is to read the dedication, which really sums it up. This book is dedicated to my queer ancestors who went before me that I never knew existed, whose stories I'll never know. I hope I'm making you proud. So it's just like nod to the ancestors, and he talks about how he wanted a project so youth wouldn't have to experience that silence, which is just so lovely. So 320 pages, contains 24 essays and artwork of the people discussed. Now, when I say essay, it's okay. It's okay. Don't worry. They are short, easy to read reflections that are immensely enjoyable. So I would say they're more like short reflections. So yeah, it's okay. For example, we have an essay reflection from Tan France of the current Queer Eye cast, talking about the original Queer Eye and how that was unique for queer-coded television at the time because the cast was still queer when the cameras shut off. These people still had out lives. They were actual gay men on more than just the script. So when Tan was young, he was exploring his identity and figuring that whole thing out. Seeing that on TV meant a lot. That's the kind of thing we're talking about. So the book is divided into 4 sections: words to dance to, focusing on performers; words of joy, sharing stories of queer joy that'll bring a tear to your eye. I cried in almost all of the ones I read, fair warning. Words to inspire change, discussing those who took a risk to better community; and words of wisdom, recognizing the significant and historically erased queer contribution to the arts. So there's so much in here. We have Elton John telling us how Divine inspired his love of drag, Courtney talking about Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, Mae Martin on Tim Curry and Rocky Horror Picture Show, Gus Kensworthy on fellow out Olympic athlete Adam Rippon, and more. So I recommend to readers who want short, easy to read stories that inspire. If you know some of the icons, that of course makes it even better. And I would really recommend these days for people who are looking for a ray of light, because this is truly a celebration of story from community about community.
So for my last book, I wanted to highlight this fun and sexy book from the blockbuster queer romance writer Casey McQuiston. This book really takes on the theme of eat, drink, and be merry. So they take it seriously. Theo is so basically the premise of the book, Theo, who's non-binary, and Kit, were childhood best friends turned lovers, and they break up right before they were supposed to go on a 3-week food and wine tour of France, Spain, and Italy. 4 years later, the two of them separately decide to take the tour before the vouchers expire, and they've both changed. Theo is an aspiring sommelier. Kit is a pastry chef in Paris, and Theo suggests a friendly competition to see who would be the first to sleep with their Italian tour guide, to prove they're over each other, of course. Except they're definitely not over each other. So sometimes you need an escape from the grief and the apocalyptic horror. So a romance may be just what you need. If you enjoy food and wine too, I think the descriptions are really lovely and involving. I really enjoy reading about queer characters having fun, traveling, and seeing these romantic cities. And of course, the tension is strong, and there's a number of misunderstandings that happen in sort of the classic romance style, but there's really nothing classic about this book. Like, it is what one reviewer calls a near utopian version of queerness, in which pretty much every character is something other than hetero. And that's the best thing about this book.
Thanks for joining us for Stuff Picks. If you enjoyed the program, take a look at our other episodes on our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. We hope you're able to watch our next offering of Staff Picks. See ya!